Back here on HQ Spotlight, fantasy football is right around the corner, and we have Jamey Eisenberg with us on set. Jamey, the fantasy football draft-a-thon. What more can you tell us about it? I know it's for a great cause.
It's to benefit the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. We have a fun event coming up at 4:30 Eastern where Adam Azer, who is exceptionally tall in this particular photo, is taking on our colleague Dan Schneier. We're going to try and raise as much money as we can to support St. Jude. We're over $125,000 already, so our audience has been fantastic. And we still have a lot of things you can auction off as well. So check out our Tiltify page and obviously scan the QR code as well.
He's also wearing a tie, by the way, Azer.
Wow, Adam Azer just getting a lot of grief on that graphic. Welcome back into Spotlight. Jacqueline D'Agostino, Tommy Tran, we have Heath Cummings, and Jamey Eisenberg here with us on set because, guys, we did a half PPR 12-team mock draft yesterday. So we're here to go through it, kind of give our thought process, why we picked what we picked, all the things, maybe ask some questions on behalf of like some other drafts that you have going on later. We'll see. Tommy.
This is the Jacqueline hour.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
It will be, though, by the end.
Okay, but Tommy, you were the lucky duck who got the #1 overall pick.
Thank you, random draft generator.
Yeah, I'm convinced it was rigged. But what did you decide to do with that #1
Did you want
pick?
change on the $20?
Bitcoin, Venmo, however it happens, Jamey. Yeah, so I went with Jamar Chase, and I think that that's a slam dunk for me. I know he just got paid. I know that sometimes you worry about guys getting paid. I'm not worried. Well, one of 3 wide receivers to hit 400 points, fantasy points in PPR. So I think that the Bengals offense is still good. The Bengals defense is still bad. So for me, it was actually an easy choice. I had another one where I had the 3rd pick where I was worried about Bijan Robinson or CeeDee Lamb, which I know we'll talk about a little bit. But for me, if I had the #1 overall pick, I would take Jamar Chase. But I do want to ask our guys quickly, though, is he the consensus #1 coming into this? Is there any conversation about anybody else, Jamey?
He's the consensus #1 in PPR. In half PPR, it gets a little bit, more of a discussion, and certainly in non-PPR. So I think you can make a case for Bijan Robinson just based on him being the #1 running back, and obviously receptions not mattering as much. But I tend to lean more toward my PPR rankings when I look at half PPR leagues. I would encourage everybody to do the same, lean toward PPR rankings. And I think Chase is just a little bit safer. So love the upside for both those. Those are 1 and 2.
Okay. Once
you get to 3, there's a debate. I agree with you, CeeDee Lamb. I think Heath will as well. But there could be a debate for 3 on, whether it's Barkley or I know Heath likes Devon Achane a lot. Christian McCaffrey's up there. Justin Jefferson's still in the conversation. There's a lot of great players. But 1 and 2 for me should be locked in. Chase and Robinson in some order.
Okay. And let's go through those early picks in our 12-team half PPR mock. So, again, I took Chase. One of our producers, Thomas Schaefer, took Bijan Robinson, and Rob Thomas took Jahmyr Gibbs. So then we get to Heath, who had the 4th overall pick. And, Heath, you decided to go with wide receiver and 1 CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, and I was very thankful to get to draft him because I do have him #3 overall. And so it was a little bit of value in that regard. I expect the Cowboys to be one of the most pass-heavy offenses in the NFL this year, and Lamb to still be the clear #1, earning 10 targets per game. But it wasn't just about him. I have quite a bit of concern about the wide receivers at the 2-3 term when I was coming back. And if I didn't take CeeDee Lamb, if he'd been gone, I was really 3 or 4 running backs that I'm choosing, a lot of the names that Jamey said, and then I may not have a wide receiver until round 4. So really happy to get Lamb at the 4th pick, and also the reason why I think your pick of Chase was the right one, because the running backs and tight ends are maybe better at the 2-3 turn than the wide receivers.
Good point there, and I think, again, format, by the way, we had a 3 wide receiver plus a flex in our situation of what we did yesterday. So taking a look at 4 through 6, Lamb goes off the board with Heath, then Dave Richard took Justin Jefferson, and Saquon Barkley at 6. So then, Jamey, you have 7 here on the second half of the turn here, and you went with Christian McCaffrey, who last year was the #1 guy.
Got to try and swing for the fences, Tommy. And, obviously McCaffrey last year let a lot of people down. Only playing in 4 games. It was very frustrating with the injury situation. But he's healthy now. And I know 29 years old. Can he get back to that form, to that level of production? 23 PPR points per game. Right around 20 half PPR points per game in that 2023 campaign. There's just so much to love about the situation. The receiving core around him in the 49ers, wide receiver room is falling apart right now. Brandon Ayuk may not play until week 6. We don't know the situation with Juwan Jennings right now. Ricky Pearsall did not have a complete rookie season. He may get back to leading the position in receptions again, or certainly challenging for that. And so I just love the upside of what McCaffrey can still bring for maybe 1 more season. So I actually like him better than Barkley. And so he's a top 5 overall pick for me. I would have taken him ahead of both Jefferson and Barkley, who went in that top 5.
All right, so Jamey, you took CMC at number 7, and then I had the number 8 overall pick, and so I took Malik Neighbors. My thought process here, I was like really married to the fact of getting a wide receiver. I kind of panicked. BTJ was still on the board personally, and maybe because I'm a little biased, I'm a little bit higher on Brian Thomas Jr.
Just a little bit, folks.
So in hindsight, I wish I went that direction because I love drafting with my heart, which is probably a big mistake. But I feel like Malik Neighbors had one of the most impressive seasons by a Giants receiver in a very long time, and it was like Tommy DeVito, Drew Lock, like these guys throwing in the ball. I don't know how much better Russell Wilson is going to be based off of that 1 year that we saw in Pittsburgh, but I'd like to think it can only get better, right, than Tommy DeVito. If we look at the numbers that he put up, it's Daniel Jones, that mix of that crazy QB room that we saw last season. So I draft hopefully, and I think Malik Neighbors, he's not like in that top, tier of the top 3 guys, but if you have the 8th overall pick, I thought it was a pretty good move.
Once you get to wide receiver 4, there's a discussion.
Yeah.
So I think you said it best. You got Chase, you got Lamb, you got Jefferson, and then it's a wild card. And so if you didn't want to pivot to running back, which I think Devon Achane would have been a smart pick as well, not that you made a bad one. Neighbors, huge upside, huge potential. Russell Wilson is definitely an upgrade over what they had. And same with Jackson Dart. He may also be better than what they had a year ago also. So if we do see a pivot at some point from, struggling Giants team going to the young player, it could be awesome. And there's that wild card of maybe it's Jameis.
I was going to say, that's probably the best case scenario for him, right?
We were hoping for Jameis to Neighbors because while Jameis is going to have his mistakes, the YOLO balls that he was going to get with those home run plays, Russell will give him those as well. But I think the upside would obviously have favored Jameis Winston starting there. But I think you made a very good choice, and in some cases a safe choice with huge upside because, again, Achane would have been my selection. I actually like Nico Collins a little bit better. But again, when you're looking for huge ceiling potential, Malik Neighbors may lead the NFL in targets this year.
So a lot of people don't know this, but one of my major roles here at CBS Sports is to provide weekly affirmations for Jacqueline about her fantasy football chances and her team, as well as offering her advice. And so I'm going to do that again here. Malik Neighbors is my number 4 wide receiver. I think this was the right pick if you were going to go with a wide receiver. Jamey talked about how much I like Achane. I would have taken him at pick 4 if CeeDee Lamb had been gone. But if you're going to take a wide receiver, I think that the difference cannot be overstated between Russell Wilson, even if he's just average now, and the guys that were throwing the football to Neighbors last year. This is a guy who's a dark horse to be the best wide receiver in fantasy this year.
How many people did you give that job to?
What do you
I was going to say, it's more than a side hustle. It's like a full-time job.
It's a committee effort. It's not just Heath. It's all of you guys.
Some people put together college bowl games, and then others put together a Jacqueline affirmation committee.
You know what? And I've made it to the playoffs the last 2 years, and I've usually at least win one playoff game, and then I kind of, and then something happens. I'm determined to get better.
That's
and
probably
make it
also
a little
rigged, which you thought the draft order was rigged, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. But, this is good practice. So, as mentioned, I took Malik Neighbors there at number 8. Mayron, same thought as you. Jamey, he hopped on Devon Achane, and then Nico Collins was still on the board, so our producer Jack took Nico Collins as well. Puka Nacua went 11. And guys, do you have any thoughts about our producer James Lambert's taking Josh Allen, number 12 overall?
Oh, James. No. Listen. When you take a broad view of the managers that take quarterbacks early, the teams usually look okay if they do everything right. But the players that James passed on, Brian Thomas Jr., Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Ashton Genty, Derrick Henry, they have the ability to be difference makers at a thinner position, whereas Josh Allen is going to be good. He wasn't even QB1 last year, and I don't have him ranked as QB1. I think Lamar Jackson, as we showed last year, 5 points better than Josh Allen. And so I don't ever want to fault somebody for following their decisions on what they make, but I'm going to fault James here. James, I love you, buddy, but not the right choice.
Well, let's bring up round 2 because you mentioned he missed out on BTJ, but he really didn't because then he snagged him. I was, 3 picks later, so I was.
Got 2 of them though.
I know, fingers crossed. I was like, okay, BTJ is going to fall to me. I was living in a delusional land. So thank you, James, for snagging my guy. AJ Brown then goes. Jack takes Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then Mayron taking Ashton
Double running back, by the way.
Yeah, back to back. So for me, I decided to go with that 17th overall pick. I took Derrick Henry. So my thought process here was okay, I'm not going to get those top 3, top tier 1 receivers. So I kind of want to go that way in terms of the running back. So rushed for nearly 2,000 yards last season, 18 total touchdowns. I really am not hoping for a decline. I think the Ravens, they're in that, we need to win a championship with Lamar Jackson. It's like win now mode. So I'm not expecting that 1-2 punch there to slow down anytime soon. That's what I'm really hanging on to. So since I kind of missed out on one of those top tier wide receivers, I wanted to kind of go that direction for running back with
love
this pick.
the pick, especially in half PPR. I actually have recently moved, and has nothing to do with the preseason game. It's just looking at, the bigger picture. I would actually move Derrick Henry ahead of Ashton Genty, which is not something that we see a lot. I just think, again, I'm tired of rooting against the guy. He's just amazing. So based on your selection, it allowed me to take one of my favorite players this year, especially starting running back in round 1. I get Drake London in round 2. And I'm almost at the point where I'm moving Drake London ahead of A.J. Brown. Not because I don't love A.J. Brown. I don't love the hamstring injury that A.J. Brown continues to miss practice with. Right now, Drake London is in an unbelievable spot because Darnell Mooney, the second receiver there, dealing with a shoulder injury. We don't know when he's going to return. So there's a huge upside here for a guy that had a monstrous Week 18 last year when Darnell Mooney didn't play. Michael Penix seemed to have a strong connection with Drake London. No surprise, he's going to be one of the top tier wide receivers. So to get him in the middle of round 2, for me, that was one of my favorite picks, and I love starting with McCaffrey and London with my first 2 selections.
All right, Jamey bullish on Drake London as we continue round 2. After Jamey's selection at 18, Bob went with Brock Bowers out of Vegas, and then the former rushing king in Vegas, Josh Jacobs, with Dave Richards. So then Heath at 21, you went with Kyren Williams. Interesting where you landed there, because you have any issues or worries about ball security, and also does the Matthew Stafford situation have anything to do with how bullish or what you're talking about Kyren Williams this year?
Honestly, this was probably the toughest decision I had in the entire draft, because I have Kyren Williams and Trey McBride back-to-back in my rankings. I went back and forth all the way down to the last second on the clock, ultimately deciding to go with Kyren Williams, partially because it's half PPR and not full PPR. I don't really have any concerns about ball security because the Rams don't seem to have any concerns about ball security. 21 touches per game each of the last 2 seasons. And they just rewarded him with a long-term contract. The only addition to this backfield in the offseason was a day 3 running back who I don't expect to really cut into Williams' work that much. And if something happens to Matthew Stafford, I think Jimmy Garoppolo, while he's not Matthew Stafford, is still good enough to run a stable NFL offense. And it may mean that they have to rely on the run more, not less. So I love getting the workhorse running back to pair with my 10 target per game wide receiver.
All right, so Heath takes Kyren Williams at number 21 overall. Ladd McConkey goes off the board next. And then we have Jonathan Taylor coming off at number 23. So, Tommy, that brings us to you. You took Jamar Chase with that number 1 overall pick. So tell us what you did at 24.
So, because I had to wait a little while to finally come back around at 24, again, with the format of our PPR mock draft and then 3 wide receivers set with the flex, I decided to go receiver, and I went with Jackson Smith and Jigba with the Seahawks. JSN is actually a player I had last year, and the interesting thing is I traded him right before he actually had that second half burst.
Dang.
And so I was able to see producer Jack Capitorno enjoy some of the JSN value
what did you get
on the backhand. I don't even remember what I traded away. I think we won for both sides, which is rare for me because I've had some notorious bad trades here for FFT. But again, you're going to see my team. It's all about stacking the receivers and then backfilling with some of the running backs. So again, starting off with Chase and JSN, I felt pretty good about it.
All right, so let's look at round 2 and that recap from our 12-team half PPR mock. So, Tommy, you take JSN 24. I ended up taking Derrick Henry 17. Jamey, anything like standing out to you here that's like questions, comments, concerns?
I do want to ask Tommy this because we have this discussion quite a bit. First off, did you consider T. Higgins at that spot and taking both Bengals wide receivers? Mm-hmm. And you said you took wide receiver, running back, not to get ahead of where we are, but did you consider going running back because you did start with Jamar Chase?
I did think about that. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that because Jonathan Taylor was a player that I targeted. Now you're going to see who I ended up picking because JT was already off the board. But I also didn't want to go too Bengal heavy with T. Higgins. And also when we get later on in round 3, by the way, this will be a tease why I didn't take Chase Brown. So let's go now to round 3, and it went Bucky Irving at running back, and we talked about T. Higgins potentially being there, Chase Brown also being there. I didn't want to double up on the Bengals, and I also believe that Bucky Irving is primed to have a breakout year with what a Tampa Bay team, Jamey, everybody seems to be bullish on with the win total, with everything with Baker Mayfield. I know Rachaad White is still there with some part of a timeshare, but I love Bucky Irving in this spot. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, totally agree. And I love Chase Brown in this spot too. So I don't think you would have made a wrong pick. I think they're both high upside players coming off strong finishes to the 2024 season. They're both in great spots. And you mentioned Rachaad White. He's dealing with a groin injury right now. So day to day, not expected to miss a lot of time. They do have another guy that they like there in Sean Tucker. But these are the running backs that you're going to see in the back end of the second round. And there's so much potential there. So Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs sometimes slips to that range. Kyron Williams sometimes in this range as well. But Bucky Irving, Chase Brown are two guys a lot of people have to make decisions on. And if I have Jamar Chase and I get one of those two guys, some cases take both of those guys, I love that turn at the 2-3 spot.
All right, let's keep it going in terms of that third round. Early returns had me taking Bucky. Then Thomas takes T. Higgins, and then Tyreek Hill is off the board. Then Heath, you talked about Trey McBride earlier in the last block, and he's there for you. And by the way, for a guy that you see the receiving touchdowns there, it took him a while to even get number 1. What's the projections for you about this year?
Yeah, I said for round 2, it was the most difficult pick that I had to make. This was the easiest pick. I was just slamming draft Trey McBride the second I was on the clock. Love him in round 3 in half PPR or full PPR. This is a guy who, you mentioned it, could not get into the end zone for the majority of last year and still was in competition for tight end 1 on a per game basis. I would anticipate for a normal tight end that sees 150 targets in a season to score 7 or 8 touchdowns. If he had done that last year, we'd be talking about him at the 1-2 turn, not the 2-3 turn. Now, it has been a couple of years of low touchdown totals for Trey McBride, and that might be a Kyler Murray problem. So I project him right around where the Sportsline projection is at 5 touchdowns. But even if he only has 5, if he does what he did last year with 5 touchdowns, he should be a round 2 pick. Absolutely loved getting McBride in this spot.
Okay, let's continue that conversation of what we had here in round 3. Chase Brown is off the board after Dave takes him. James Cook also off the board. So then, Jamey, you finally then go, or you not finally go receiver, but you target receiver in this spot here. Did you have any other options other than what you went with, which was Davante Adams at 31?
I love Davante Adams in this spot, and there's some concern you asked, Heath, about Kyron Williams and this Rams offense, and obviously you got to worry about the quarterback, but I think he said it best. Jimmy Garoppolo in Sean McVay's system versus Jimmy Garoppolo with the Raiders, and we know how that relationship was between Garoppolo and Adams. It was awful. But you saw at least if you got a chance to watch the joint practice between the Cowboys and the Rams, Garoppolo was connecting with Davante Adams. He was killing the Cowboys defense, whether that's an indictment on their defense or not. And we typically get worried about wide receivers past 30, especially when they get to the 32, age range, where Adams is right now. He just hasn't shown any signs of slowing down. So I don't want to take him in the first 2 rounds, but once we get to this round 3 range, these are 2 of my top 13 wide receivers. I think Adams still has the upside to finish as a top 10 guy, as we saw last year with Aaron Rodgers. So it's going to take a lot of volume. It's going to obviously take probably Stafford being at 100%. So some ifs, but again, I'm trying to win the league. I'm not trying to finish second or anything further than that. I think Adams gives me a huge potential, especially with McCaffrey in London as my first 2 selections.
All right, so with my 32 overall pick here, I also went receiver. I went with Garrett Wilson. I know down the stretch of last season wasn't all that great. He does have Justin Fields, so I feel a little iffy about that, but signs that extension, they lock him up, so I'm feeling like it's all up from here. So, Jamey, do you like him in this spot, Garrett Wilson?
He's in that same, range of receivers for me with Davante Adams. And, you mentioned last year wasn't great at the end of the season. Before they traded for Davante Adams, he was on the way to that breakout campaign that we're hoping for this year. They have that college relationship. Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson were together at Ohio State. So we have seen Justin Fields have a great performance with at least one wide receiver in his career with DJ Moore in Chicago in 2023. So there's the potential for Wilson to take that step forward. You look at the rest of his receiving core, it's garbage. It really is bad for the rest of the Jets. So we could be seeing one of the target leaders here. So I do like him in this spot, absolutely.
Yeah, you got to think he is the guy there for the Jets. All right, getting a quick recap here of round 3 after Garrett Wilson. Marvin Harrison Jr. goes off the board, then Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, which is crazy because I remember last season we were talking about him in a top 3 pick. And then James going with Mike Evans. So looking here again, 37 through 40, Chuba Hubbard, George Kittle, Omarion Hampton, DK Metcalf, and then it was back to me at number 41.
And you went with?
I went with James Conner. Right? Yeah, I did. Okay, so my running back room is a little older, if we will say it. But you know what? I don't know. After going, getting 2 wide receivers on the board and only having 1 running back, I wanted to go back to the running back. So I don't know. I feel like I had James Conner last season. He was pretty productive for me overall. But I don't know, Jamey, thoughts? Do you like the pick at running back with James Conner at 41?
I don't mind it. There are a couple other guys that I would have taken. Travion Henderson, who went 2 picks after you took Conner, and I got somehow lucky to get R.J. Harvey in round 5. So I like the younger running backs just a little bit better. But once we get to this range of running backs, this is where it's going to be a jumbled mix. And do you trust the youth of these rookies and the timeshares that they're going to be in? From Omarion Hampton to Travion Henderson to R.J. Harvey, and all the way down with how these rookies are going to share time with some veterans. Conner doesn't really have that. I know Kyler Murray and the coaching staff have said Trey Benson's going to be potentially a breakout candidate, and maybe it's a 1 and a 1A. I just think that Conner's still very established. So I don't love taking the 2 older running backs together. But listen, you want experience, you want proven commodities. These 2 guys were as good as you can find last year in Henry and Conner. And the value on Conner, I think, is pretty apropos in round 4.
And then staying in round 4, Jamey, you ended up getting Lamar Jackson in that round.
So people watching this are going to say, there's no way Lamar Jackson falls to round 4 in my leagues in a 1 quarterback league, certainly not in this super flex or 2 quarterback league. 100% accurate. But most of our analyst drafts, unless you're talking about James Lambert's, are going to take quarterbacks, usually in rounds 2 or later. And so the fact that Lamar fell to me, I'm usually a wait on quarterback fantasy manager. It's the way I draft, the way I usually build my teams. I try to find the Bo Nix, the Baker Mayfields, the guys that break out with the later round selections. But Lamar Jackson sitting there in round 4 was just too hard to pass up. So the fact that I had running back, 2 wide receivers that I love, this was almost a luxury pick. If he has the 27, 28 point per game performance in half PPR like we saw last year. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. It was 30 points per game regardless. So look at me making that mistake. 30 points per game that we saw from him last year. He's still going to have immense opportunity to be special, and I didn't want to pass on that.
And then 3 picks later, Heath, you have Courtland Sutton after Henderson and Daniels came off the board.
Yeah, this was a harder decision about the player maybe than it was about the position, because I already had 1 running back and I had a pretty good idea who I was going to take in round 5 for my 2nd running back. And this is a 3 wide receiver league with Jaden Daniels being gone 1 pick before me, which is what I really wanted. I did take Courtland Sutton. I think he's one of the more underrated wide receivers in terms of looking at ADP, because in a lot of drafts you can find Courtland Sutton in round 5. I think he's an excellent round 4 pick. Set career highs in his first year with Bo Nix with 135 targets, 81 receptions. He scored 18 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. One of those guys that's going to get you close to 140 targets is also very good at getting into the end zone. An excellent wide receiver 2 for your team.
All right, so Heath takes Courtland Sutton. I can speak. 45 there. And then we have Jalen Hurts. I feel like once 1 quarterback goes, then we start to see the trickle-down effect, right? So then we get...
Unless, of course, you're James.
Yeah.
12th overall.
But we saw the trickle-down effect here in round 4 with Joe Burrow. And so, Tommy, you were up next at 48, and you went to the Carolina Panthers.
I did. I'm a big Ted McMillan fan. I think Teteroa McMillan has the potential to be top 15 wide receiver when it's all said and done. And again, this is all part of my strategy that I had. Is going to be a lot of wide receivers, and I'm playing the percentages. I'm just hoping most of these guys will hit. I could probably take a dud or 2, or maybe even injury. And you'll continue to see my draft strategy. Again, after taking Bucky Irving, I went back to the well to try to get wide receiver. There you go. And I'm also going to wait on quarterback like a lot of the guys do. So Chase, JSN, Ted McMillan. And I tell you what, folks, I wasn't done yet with the wide receivers. Stay tuned for that when we get to rounds 5 and 6. But again, here's a look at the round 4. Chuba Hubbard, James, that's a homer pick for him. Speaking of talking about his selections that we have today. Welcome back. Let's go rounds 5 and 6. So I had the turn end at 4, start 5, and I go Terry McLaurin to go with Jamar Chase, JSN, and Ted McMillan. Now, of course, we know what he can do with Jaden Daniels, but there's the contract issue, the trade request, and then him being on the PUP list with, I'm putting in air quotes, ankle injury. Heath, what are we thinking about T-Mac and those that are targeting him and thinking about drafting him?
Yeah, I'm just now getting to the point where I'm a little bit nervous about the holdout, not because I think he's going to miss actual regular season games, but at some point you do have to worry about the total amount of practice he's missed. Still, I think if you can get him in round 5, that's a very good value. If everything's okay and he's a full go week 1, I think he's a top 15 wide receiver.
All right, and for me, he would be slotted in the flex, so I'm okay with that and seeing where it goes. Xavier Worthy there at 50, David Montgomery off the board at 51. Heath, I go right back to you. You went running back here at 52.
This is the reason I didn't take a running back in round 4, because I knew DeAndre Swift would be there in round 5. Swift was RB15 the last time he was paired up with Ben Johnson on a per game basis. That was when he was sharing with Jamal Williams, who had 17 rushing touchdowns that season. I think he has a chance in the upside to have a career year even better than that top 15 season. But the nice thing is you can draft him at his floor. DeAndre Swift has never finished worse than RB24 on a per game basis.
Okay, and then let's go through that 5th round up through 54 with another bear off the board in DJ Moore. Rashee Rice taken at 54. Jamey, this is also conversations to be had about the rookies in Harvey and Henderson here, and you went with one of them there at 54, didn't you?
Couldn't believe that he fell to this spot, because we know that rookies get hyped up when you start to see them on the field. And you saw him do some nice things, most importantly, who he played with, which was the starters. So we still have questions about, is it going to be J.K. Dobbins getting the first opportunity come week 1? We'll see what Dobbins does in the second preseason game compared to Harvey. But the fact that he got all this opportunity in the first preseason game against San Francisco with the starting group, and a lot of positive to see, especially the speed. So I like drafting him late round 3, early round 4, mostly round 4. But in half PPR, non-PPR, you start to see that running back value get pushed up. To get him in round 5, especially after, I was debating Harvey over Lamar Jackson in round 4. That's how much I like Harvey. So to have him fall to me in round 5, that feels like a steal.
All right, I had the very next pick at 56, and I'm cool with my 30-plus-year-old running back, so I decided to go get another wide receiver, and I went with George Pickens. Talent is not the issue for George Pickens. It's just, off the field things. I feel like he's in a better situation offensively speaking with Dak Prescott. I know there's some questions with his injury and what he's going to look like, but overall, Dak Prescott throwing the ball should be great for George Pickens, so I do have high hopes. How do you like the value here of taking Pickens in this 56 range, Jamey?
Well, since Tommy wanted to tee up Heath on Terry McLaurin, I'll just tell you I like George Pickens better than Terry McLaurin right now.
Okay.
Just because of the situation. Not necessarily about the player, but the situation. And so Pickens is in a great spot. And the way that Dak Prescott and this offense is going to operate, they're going to throw the ball a lot. And so we could see a lot of concentrated targets. Lamb's going to be the target leader by far, but we could see him in that 7-8 target range just because of how they used to feature Jake Ferguson, for example, 2 years ago when Dak was healthy. So I think Pickens is in line for a career season, so I like to pick a lot in this spot.
Okay, yeah, I am a little bit nervous about the Dak injury, but my fingers are crossed. So quickly recapping the rest of round 5 here. After Pickens, we have Jameson Williams going off the board, Alvin Kamara, Devontae Smith, Sam Laporta. So now we're starting to see, guys starting to dip into the tight end conversation. I have the pick over at 65, but before that, Zay Flowers, Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley, which I thought was interesting, going at 63, and then I really did want Travis Hunter, but Mayron sniped me, man, and took him right there at 64. So I did an emotional pick, and I went with Ricky Pearsall, former Florida Gator great, and I was seeing some, I was in some Niners Reddit threads and things like that, the depths of the internet, saying that he could be approaching as wide receiver 1, ? I don't know. I like my pick here.
It's a little aggressive, but I do like it as well.
Yeah.
I think, again, if you are looking for upside, this is the type of player who has as much right now as anybody that we can talk about at this position in this range. So I would have taken Jerry Jeudy. I still like Jalen Waddle slightly ahead of him as well. But, again, when you're looking for home run potential, Ricky Pearsall, depending on how long, really at this point, Juwan Jennings, because we're expecting Brandon Ayuk to miss, as Kyle Shanahan said, maybe 6 weeks. Now, you guys put me in a tough spot here with the players that went off the board, because you mentioned Travis Hunter. I liked him in this spot. I like Calvin Ridley in this spot. I would have considered Pearsall, but I like Isaiah Pacheco in half PPR. This full PPR, I'm taking a wide receiver. So, Tommy, like you said, you're stockpiling wide receivers. I did a little something that I'm not used to doing, which is stockpiling running backs. So after taking McCaffrey, after getting Harvey, I was struggling with this. So do I take my third receiver, or do I take my flex? And a lot of people look at it and they say, your flex could be anything, you don't focus on it. I totally disagree with that theory. It's a starter in your lineup no matter what position you're looking at. If Pacheco is right, and right now you've heard nothing of anything significantly positive from Kareem Hunt or Elijah Mitchell or Brashard Smith consistently, it's Pacheco looks back, he has the opportunity to still be that guy. Take him as my flex. I was thrilled with that in this spot.
All right, Pacheco, that injury last year took him a little while to get back, and from a fantasy perspective, it was tough for him to come through at the end with what Hunt was doing. But again, that was last year. Jamey giving us an update of what we're hearing this year. Matthew Golden, Jerry Jeudy, a couple of receivers off the board. And Heath then at 69. You go with Jalen Waddle, which, you know, for the last couple of years was in that clear wide receiver 2 category. What are you thinking about him here in round 6?
I will just say that once again, Dave sniped me with Jerry Jeudy, but I love Jalen Waddle in round 6. And I think you said it right. Up until the 2024 season, Jalen Waddle had been an easy pick as a wide receiver 2. He'd been a borderline wide receiver 1 in some instances. And then last year, Jonnu Smith comes into the picture and the offense changes completely. The Dolphins went from throwing 65% of their passes to wide receivers to dropping down into the 50s. Jonnu Smith's gone now. Darren Waller's there. He hasn't even been able to practice yet. I'm not sure Darren Waller's going to have the type of impact that Jonnu Smith, in fact, I don't think he will. So the targets go back up for Waddle. The real sneaky side of this is Tyreek Hill's got a little bit banged up. There's all types of drama going on in that building with Tyreek Hill. If he misses an extended period of time, I didn't just draft a number 2 wide receiver as my number 3. I drafted a number 1.
All right, so Jalen Waddle goes off the board, and then we have Joe Mixon who goes off the board. Same with Aaron Jones, back-to-back running back picks. But now we're at Tommy, and we know, if we know one thing about Tommy that we've learned, you are stockpiling wide receivers, and that is the route that you went.
I will say, though, I did think about Joe Mixon there, but Rob took Joe at 70. So after that was done, I said, and I don't really love Aaron Jones, and you'll see why later on in my draft. But again, I took Jacoby Myers. Look, Geno Smith went from a 3-headed monster in Seattle to potentially now a 2-headed monster in Vegas. And I know that, you know, obviously Brock Bowers is number 1, but there's no reason that Myers can't be close to that. And at worst, wide receiver 2. So again, if Terry McLaurin for some reason isn't there, I could put Myers in the flex. So I'm feeling pretty good. And again, to your point, Jacqueline, I am stockpiling wide receivers as many as I can, with the exception, of course, of Bucky Irving.
I do like, though, that, you know, you stick to your Gators and your Jaguars.
Yep.
Tommy sticks to his Raiders. Like, it's fun to see that, you know, you stick to the teams that you root for.
Even
and
if Derek Carr's not slinging it around.
Hey, listen,
right?
Jacoby Myers is one of the more underrated players in the NFL, and certainly one of the more underrated fantasy wide receivers also.
All right, welcome back to Spotlight, round 7 and 8. Once again, I had that turn after Jacoby Myers. I then went back to fill out RB2. Tyrone Tracy, who really came on the scene, was time sharing with Devin Singletary, Heath last year, did have the fumbleitis late in the year. What do you think about Tracy here in the 7th, potentially 8th round?
I think it is an absolute gift to take all the wide receivers that you did and then still get Tyrone Tracy in round 7. Well done. He is a round 6 pick for me, or right at the very beginning of round 7, like you got him. I think the Cam Scatterbo injuries really opened the door to him being the true lead back for the Giants at the beginning of the year. And I would take him over Joe Mixon and Pacheco, a couple of the guys that were already taken.
Okay, so let's continue that conversation for round 7, because you had to pick a few later in terms of Olave and Jennings off the board, and then you went quarterback with Patrick Mahomes at 76.
And my background has nothing to do with this selection. I'm not like that, and Tommy just taking the guy from the team that I like. No, it just, at some point, despite the fact that Patrick Mahomes has not been a fantasy superstar the last 2 years, at some point it gets too late in the draft to continue passing on him. The Chiefs have talked a lot about pushing the ball downfield more. Xavier Worthy will help them do that, like he did in the second half of last year. The Josh Simmons selection seems to have been the perfect fit for the Chiefs, and maybe given the protection he needs to take some more of those deep shots. I have not loved the Rashee Rice news today and the potential that he could be gone for longer than what I thought he was going to be, but still like Mahomes a lot in round 7.
All right, let's continue round 7 here, where Jamey Eisenberg is up after a couple of picks where Diggs and Ibuka are off the board. And Jamey, you picked David Njoku, who was like a league winner a couple years ago, continuing to be a real reliable tight end option.
If you remember what happened a couple of years ago, it was the strong finish that he had in his final 5 games with an old quarterback coming off the couch who happened to be the comeback player of the year in Joe Flacco, who's most likely going to be be the starter in week 1.
I see what you're doing here.
And
Full
so
circle.
the connection is amazing. And so you have a guy here that is now going to move up to tight end 4 for me with this Laporta news that he's going to miss. So Laporta's been tight end 4 for me. I'm going to move Njoku to tight end 5 up a spot. I just think that there's so much upside for him at one of the more discounted prices at the position. So I love drafting David Njoku wherever I can, and to add him on this roster, to me was just another added piece and taking advantage of the draft board.
All right, so I picked next, and once I was starting to see some of the quarterbacks go off the board at the end of round 6, and then I saw Heath go Patrick Mahomes, I started to kind of get like QB panic in that mode.
FOMO.
I did have Baker Mayfield last season. He was very serviceable for me, so I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go back to the well. He has a ton of weapons. I think this team is primed to go win the division for a 5th straight year, so I went and took Baker Mayfield as my quarterback, my QB1 for fantasy. So if Heath, what do you think about taking Bake in that spot?
I think that right behind Mahomes is the area where he generally comes off the board. I'm a little bit worried about the career high touchdown rate from last year and the fact there may be some regression in that area. He's not one of those quarterbacks that generally does much with his legs, but he did do more than we expected last year. So a very, very safe starting quarterback for your fantasy football team. If I took him, I might want to take another quarterback in the double-digit rounds that I thought had a little bit more upside.
And I did do that. I took a sleeper, and we'll get to that later. But, Jamey, if we're looking at round 7 here, anything jumping out to you in terms of what our team did?
Well, I think you know probably the one player that stands out the most is Emeka Egbuka because rookie wide receiver, a lot of upside. Chris Godwin yet to be drafted, and are we going to start to see that consistently where Egbuka is going ahead of Godwin because Godwin may not be ready for week 1? So all the training camp reports about Egbuka have been amazing, and Godwin's absence could be problematic. So I've moved Egbuka ahead of Godwin, and I think a lot of people are going to follow suit.
And I would say my biggest surprise was Juwan Jennings, and this is a guy who I did have ahead of Ricky Pearsall at the beginning of training camp, but he's got a contract dispute, he's got a calf issue, and all the reports are suggesting that Ricky Pearsall looks like the #1 wide receiver on this team. I think Jennings has a lot of upside on a week-to-week basis, but I wouldn't want to take him quite this early.
All right. So that's how round 7 shook out. Now we're moving it ahead to round 8. Caleb Johnson going 85 overall, then Chris Godwin, and then Ingram going off the board, Javonte Williams, and then I had the 89th overall pick. And Tommy, I guess I was taking a page out of your book because I was just stockpiling on the wide receivers as well. I took Keon Coleman here. I know he missed some time, and that was, kind of devastating for his rookie campaign last season because of some injury, but I'm hoping for an upswing, a lot of potential here from Keon Coleman. I'm kind of banking on him taking a step forward, Jamey.
Love the selection. Again, you got Khalil Shakir dealing with a high ankle sprain, who's kind of been their steady wide receiver. They like Josh Palmer. They're going to see what they get out of Elijah Moore. This was the guy that they drafted last year to be their alpha. Prior to him suffering a wrist injury against Miami, I think it was week 9, the 2 previous games, he looked like things were starting to click for him. He's having a great training camp so far. I like him as the best Buffalo wide receiver, a guy that continues to climb in my rankings. And so very excited about Keon Coleman's potential. You took him ahead of some more proven guys, but again, the way you're building your team, proven running backs, high upside receivers, you stuck to your draft plan, and that's
I was gonna say, I'm all about upside. Like, take a risk, make it fun, why not? I don't know. Heath, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit lower than this on Keon Coleman, but to continue my theme of affirmations for you, if you're going to reach for a wide receiver, you might as well reach for the guy that has a chance to be the #1 wide receiver and the primary red zone target for one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and that's what you got in Keon Coleman. He is very good in tight spaces, and Josh Allen is very comfortable throwing to covered wide receivers. So Keon Coleman could have a big touchdown season this year.
I agree. Yeah, I mean that's the hope, and it's funny because you get to my pick next, right after Jacqueline, and this was kind of the spot where I was a little torn, a lot torn to be honest with you, because at this point I don't have my 3rd receiver. I have 3 running backs that I like a lot in Christian McCaffrey, R.J. Harvey, Isaiah Pacheco. Quarterback's done, tight end's done. Do I take a 4th running back as a luxury pick, or do I pivot and take a 3rd wide receiver here? So Deebo Samuel would have been the pick if I had gone wide receiver. I took another running back. Jaylen Warren to me at this point is my favorite Steelers running back. I'm a little concerned about the way Caleb Johnson looked in the first preseason game. They gave Jaylen Warren the veteran treatment. They let him sit out. He's going to play on passing downs. He may steal a lot of work on running downs as well. So this was a steal in my opinion. Like where you took Tyrone Tracy, I have Tracy and Warren kind of back-to-back, both going to be in some sort of timeshare with rookies. I think Warren could be one of the receiving leaders based on how Aaron Rodgers checks down to his running back. So I love this pick, but it wasn't the smartest pick necessarily for my team, especially if we show round 9 what Jacqueline did, because she took a player that I could have had, that I like a lot as well, and I could have taken Deebo Samuel here just to be a little bit safer, but I want to win. I don't want to be safe. I'll figure out that 3rd wide receiver spot.
And especially in this format, he was preferred over Najee Harris at times, or in that Pittsburgh backfield, of course. Heath, Jamey had mentioned Deebo Samuel. You then went and grabbed Deebo Samuel a little bit later on here, didn't you?
Yeah, I thought the Deebo Samuel was a great pick, but or the Jaylen Warren pick was a great pick, but I also loved that Jamey took him because I really wanted Deebo Samuel. And I do think that there's kind of two paths that this could really work out well. One, obviously, if Terry McLaurin does miss time, or if Terry McLaurin gets traded, then Deebo Samuel is going to jump up probably 3 or 4 rounds in terms of ADP. Two, when Terry McLaurin is himself, he really operates as that deep threat for Jaden Daniels, and Deebo Samuel can thrive in the underneath role as probably the best yak creator in the Washington Commanders offense. Cliff Kingsbury went against him when he was in Arizona and really didn't like it. He was very happy to bring him into this offense. He knows how to use his skills. I think Deebo is a great value even if Terry McLaurin plays, but if Terry McLaurin misses time, Deebo could be a wide receiver too.
All right, so Deebo Samuel going off the board, and that brings us to Jaden Reed, TJ Hawkinson, and then Tommy Tran. This is where you decided to take a quarterback.
Yeah, in hindsight, too, I probably could have waited a quarterback here. I could have added maybe some running back depth, but I'm buying into Bo Nix, what he did last year. I don't think he's going to have a sophomore slump. I think he's going to be just as good as he was last year. Certainly he's going to be the hope. So it kind of rounded out my team with all the wide receivers that I had taken. We talked about the 2 running backs in Bucky Irving and Tyrone Tracy with a little bit of insurance there at wide receiver. So I said, okay, let's just go ahead and take the quarterback, and then I'll take another one perhaps at the end, depending on how it all played out. But I felt pretty good about where I was at through 8 rounds. So taking a look at the rest of it, there you go. 8 rounds here in HQ Spotlight. Of course, we'll have the full entire mock draft and a recap there on CBSSports.com. And then we're going to talk about our teams coming up.
Back here on HQ Spotlight, we want to remind you guys of the FFT Draftathon that is benefiting our friends over at St. Jude. You can get all of your fantasy questions answered while also helping an amazing cause. You can learn more by scanning that QR code on your screen.
All right, time to recap the full mock draft from all 4 of our teams. Again, we went through the first 8 rounds here on HQ Spotlight. I had the pole position drafting from the number 1 slot. We got through most of my team, but here it is in full totality. And it's going to be interesting because I took Costin Loveland at tight end, finally got around to tight end. I actually ended up getting a second quarterback in Jordan Love when it was all said and done. Quinshawn Judkins, Jordan Mason, Tyler Algier, Kendre Miller. I'm just hoping that one of those will work out. And for Mason specifically, we saw what he did in San Francisco. Potentially with Aaron Jones missing a couple of games, I'm hoping that Mason will be a good backup / handcuff. All right, Heath, take me through what you thought my draft was from position 1.
Well, your wide receivers are absolutely fantastic. It's a 3 wide receiver league. That's very important. I think I would like the team a little better in a full PPR league than in a half PPR league. And you may either have the breakout tight end of the year, or you're going to be looking for a tight end to start week 2 while you wait for Colston Loveland to come into his own. The nice thing is you might be able to drop Quinshawn Judkins at that point.
Yep, of course he's dealing with some of that legal stuff out there in Cleveland. And then Heath, how did you feel about your mock draft here?
Well, you know, you should leave a mock draft feeling really good about your team, right? You drafted your guys, and I left the mock draft feeling pretty good about my team. I have 3 of my top 25 wide receivers and 4 of my top 35. I've got my number 2 tight end, my number 6 quarterback, and 2 of my top 18 running backs. You'll see here in the later rounds, what I found was we got to like round 10, and there were no wide receivers I really wanted to draft anymore. So I took a lot of backup or handcuff running backs. The one exception might be Dylan Sampson. With that Judkins legal trouble, Sampson has gotten the first carries with the 1 each of the last 2 days in training camp. His ADP could be going up and quickly.
Heath, let me ask you about the Travis Etienne selection. If people are with Etienne or Tank Bigsby, where would you land if you had your druthers?
I think half PPR, it's really difficult because in non-PPR, it's definitely Bigsby. In full PPR, it's definitely Etienne. I will lean slightly to Etienne at this point, but I will say, like, in retrospect, feel like it's probably the pick I regret the most. I'd like to have one more upside wide receiver in that spot with all the running back depth that I found later in the draft.
He's got a solid B.
He got a B. You got a B minus.
Yeah.
Did we say that? I don't know if we did.
No, but okay, B minus.
I just wanted to circle back. Jamey, we want to see your team because we still didn't know after rounds 1 through 8 who your 3rd wide receiver was. So overall, how do you feel about your team now that you're seeing it in its totality?
So I love everything about that position. I love my quarterback. I love my tight end. I love my running backs, and I love my first 2 wide receivers. I'll make the third wide receiver work. And you said, you know, just to piggyback on your Jaguars question, where would you land? Like, I would land on Bashal Tutin in round 11, you know, opposed to taking Etienne or Tank Bigsby.
Either or.
I think it's going to be messy across the board, and by the middle of the year, we may see, maybe sooner than that, we may see Tutin as the best running back for the Jaguars. So I'll take the guy who goes last. But really, it's just that third receiver spot. Now, Burden in round 7 is a little too soon based on average draft position, but I think he could be the slot receiver for the Bears. I don't love, if I had to do it, starting London and Mooney, but Mooney was the best player on the board at that point, so a little friendship strategy. If you follow our podcast, you know what that means. DeMario Douglas and Wan'Dale Robinson are much better in full PPR than half PPR, but Douglas could lead the Patriots in receptions, and Wan'Dale Robinson's coming off a 100-catch season last year, so he might be better with Russell Wilson. And Jalen McMillan, look, if Godwin's injury is as bad as it could be, he was great last year to close the season, scoring 7 touchdowns in his final 5 games. So there's a lot of upside with those receivers, you know, Burden on down. But I think, Tommy, you and I might be trade partners at some point. Like, it could be like a Jalen Warren for Jacoby Myers type thing, you know, making each of our rosters a little bit more complete.
I remember now that JSN trade, I got Tony Pollard back there.
Okay,
so
okay.
JSN Tony Pollard trade with our producer, Jack.
He got the better end of it, but you still did okay.
I did okay. I needed Pollard, and he was a little hurt down the end, but it was okay.
Yep.
It was all right.
All right, Heath, before we move it over, any thoughts, last comments, concerns on Jamey's draft?
Well, in some ways, it's almost unfair because what are you doing with Lamar Jackson in round 4? And also, David Njoku is my tight end 4, and I'd take him in round 5, and Jamey got him in round 7. In other ways, it looks like halfway through this draft, someone tied Jamey's hands behind his back and started making picks for him, because you never see a Jamey team that is like, well, who's my wide receiver 3 going to be? Yeah. I think the only other comment that I would make is, from my perspective, I really would rather be hammering those backup running backs in the last 4 or 5 rounds of a draft than trying to find a wide receiver that's going to help me, because those backup running backs could be one injury away from being a top 20 player at the position.
And
it's fantastic.
You hit the nail on the head there, because when I see him take Braylon Allen in round 10, like, this is a guy that's flying up my draft board. And I got to take a wide receiver. I can't take a 6th running back at this point. Like, he's 100% right. Like, you want to be a little bit more, you're able to chase that running back position a little bit more. So, like, his Allen and Sampson picks, like, that's why I was like, I'm taking Tutin. I don't care. Like, I want to get one of the guys that I love in that range, and Heath got 2 of them, while I'm, you know, chasing that receiver spot.
All right, so finally.
Here we go.
I was going to say,
the
only A.
Spoiler alert, I got an A, which definitely means I'm losing my league, because we know that's how that goes. So round 9, I went and got another running back. I think this is the first one I got after the first 2 guys in Derrick Henry and James Conner. So I went and got Charbonnet. Then I got my tight end and Mark Andrews in round 10. Austin Eckler. I did get another quarterback. I finally got my Jaguar and Trevor Lawrence, because Jamey, he's one of your sleeper quarterbacks that we had discussed a couple of days ago. Overall, like, I wasn't feeling great, but I'll take the A draft grade. But Jamey, what would you grade it?
It's a very solid team. You know, I would say B+ to A is certainly apropos. You know, again, when you look at what you have at wide receiver with Neighbors, Wilson, Pickens, Pearsall, like, that's a great quartet. And Keon Coleman as the 5th receiver there, that's just amazing. I love the Charbonnet pick. Like I said, if I had taken Deebo Samuel, I would have pivoted to Charbonnet, and he's an injury away from being a top 10 running back. And we saw that last year. Whenever Kenneth Walker wasn't there, Charbonnet was an absolute monster. So I love those type of upside picks. Eckler's somebody we don't talk about a lot, but he could still be a steady quality fantasy option there. So I think he did really well. Your starting lineup is awesome. You know, some questions on the bench maybe, past, you know, Charbonnet, maybe Eckler, but your starting lineup has the chance to be unbelievable this year if Henry and Connor continue to do what they do.
Well deserved of an A. Heath, if I go back to you, just is there a hot button issue or a debate going on right now in the fantasy community as these mock drafts are taking place?
Well, I think the hot button debate and issue is going to be how much you should care about Rashee Rice's hearing being pushed to the end of September, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, and how many games he's going to be suspended. It's really a strange situation that we could potentially go into week 1 and have him in our lineups and not know at what point he's going to disappear or for how long he's going to disappear.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it ties into Xavier Worthy, ties into Travis Kelce, ties into Patrick Mahomes. You know, all these guys are going to be impacted to some degree, Marquise Brown potentially as well, on how long, you know, Rice could be out. I think one thing, Tommy, we're going to see a lot with these fantasy drafts coming up is the rookies, you know, and how much do they sway drafts, you know, in terms of hot button topics, because Henderson, Hampton, Harvey, those three guys. Then you get to, what the Judkins situation is, Caleb Johnson. But then we're starting to see just the second wave of these guys. Dylan Sampson is one for sure. Bashal Tutin's another one. Jaden Blue, who we didn't really talk about, could be the starter for the Cowboys there. It's going to be a really fun group to see how this all plays out throughout the course of the season. And everybody was saying this rookie receiver class is awful. Tech McMillan continues to rise. Travis Hunter's ADP continues to rise. And now it's Abuka and it's Burden and some of these other guys, that we weren't expecting, like a Torrey Holton in Seattle, for example. Somebody who may be their third receiver, but a lot of upside as well. So these rookies, the running backs we expected to be good. Where they'll fall is going to be fun. But then the receivers, I think, are going to surprise some people as well.
All right, that's Jamey Eisenberg and Heath Cummings, sort of an FFT takeover here on HQ Spotlight. Guys, thanks for hanging out with us, talking about 8 rounds and team reveals and recaps. More of that stuff over at FFT, however you listen to your podcast, also on YouTube, here on HQ, CBS Sports Network. The guys are everywhere.